Stop everything. Because what just exploded across sports media isn't just another debate segment. It's a full-blown war between the face of the WNBA and the very league that depends on her. When reports surfaced that Caitlin Clark had received a warning regarding her high-profile NBC partnership, the reaction wasn't quiet concern. It was nuclear. And no one lit the match faster than Stephen A. Smith live on air. Glasses off, voice sharp, eyes locked into the camera. Stephen A. didn't hesitate. He didn't soften it. He didn't play neutral. He demanded the WNBA commissioner step down, not reconsider, not clarify, resign. Immediately. Why? Because in his words, when you threaten the most marketable player your league has ever seen for expanding her platform, you're not protecting the brand, you're sabotaging it. Caitlin Clark isn't just another rookie. She's box office. She's rating spikes. She's sold out arenas. She's corporate sponsors lining up with blank checks. And now the narrative is that instead of celebrating her NBC deal as free promotion for women's basketball, league leadership allegedly questioned it. The backlash was instant. Social media ignited, fans split into factions, veterans went silent, executives stayed cautious, and suddenly, what should have been a business partnership turned into a power struggle over control, image, and who really runs this league. But here's the part nobody is ready to admit. If this escalates, it could change the future of the WNBA forever. From the moment Caitlin Clark stepped into the WNBA, the pressure was suffocating. Sold-out arenas, national headlines, ticket prices doubling overnight, networks reshuffling schedules just to feature her games. She wasn't just a rookie, she was an economic engine, and everyone knew it. But what people forget is how uneasy that kind of spotlight can make a league that spent decades fighting for stability. For years, the WNBA survived on loyal core fans, modest TV contracts, and players grinding overseas to supplement salaries. Then suddenly, a 22-year-old rookie walks in and the entire financial ecosystem shifts around her. New charter flights, discussions accelerated, media rights exploded, sponsors flooded in, expansion fees skyrocketed, and with that surge came something nobody talks about: publicly internal tension. Veteran players who spent years building the foundation now watched a newcomer receive national endorsement deals worth more than most career earnings. Front offices faced uncomfortable questions about revenue splits. The commissioner had to navigate a league transforming in real time, balancing long-standing players with a superstar who was bigger than the system itself. Caitlin didn't ask for that power. She just kept shooting from the logo and breaking viewership records. But power doesn't require permission. It creates its own gravity. So when she signed a major NBC broadcasting partnership, positioning herself not just as a player, but as a cross-network basketball personality, it wasn't just another endorsement. It symbolized independence, influence beyond league control, a player becoming a media brand. And that's where everything reportedly shifted. Because once a player becomes bigger than the institution, institutions start asking uncomfortable questions. And that's when the warning came. The warning didn't come with flashing lights or a press conference. It came quietly. Legal language, corporate tone, a formal notice that Caitlin Clark's NBC broadcasting deal could represent a conflict of interest. And that's when the entire situation detonated. Because the moment that memo surfaced, Stephen A. Smith exploded. Not mild criticism, not a passing remark. He went nuclear. He leaned into the camera and said the words no one expected to hear on national television. The commissioner should resign. That wasn't commentary. That was a public execution. Stephen A. accused league leadership of being petty, of being insecure, of targeting the one player who just secured a billion-dollar media future for women's basketball. He framed it as self-sabotage, a league attacking its own growth engine. And the numbers made his outrage even louder. Clark's base WNBA salary sits around $76,000. Meanwhile, her NBC partnership reportedly dwarfs that. So the optics. Brutal. A league paying a superstar a modest rookie contract while attempting to police her multi-million-dollar external media success. That's when fans split into war camps. One side said the league has the right to protect its partnerships, that broadcast affiliations matter, that rules exist for a reason. The other side, they called it jealousy, control, fear of losing leverage over a player who doesn't financially depend on the system. And behind the scenes, whispers grew darker. Veteran players uneasy with the attention imbalance, executives worried about precedent, sponsors watching carefully, networks calculating leverage. Because if the league pushes too hard and Clark calls their bluff, The power dynamic flips overnight. And that possibility is exactly what makes this next move so dangerous. Inside league circles, the panic wasn't loud. It was controlled, measured, executive-level tension. Because once Stephen A. made it public, the issue stopped being internal policy and became a power struggle broadcast to millions. Reports began surfacing that some veterans weren't thrilled about Clark's NBC spotlight, not officially, not on record, but behind closed doors, there was friction. You have players who've spent years fighting for visibility, grinding overseas in the off-season, flying commercial, building the league brick by brick. Then suddenly a rookie signs a national broadcasting deal before finishing her first full season. That kind of meteoric rise changes locker room chemistry and leadership. They were stuck in the middle. If they let Clark operate freely, critics would say she's bigger than the league. If they clamp down, they look insecure and controlling. That's the trap. Stephen A. framed it as insecurity, as jealousy from the top, as leadership unable to handle a star who generates leverage independently. But there's another layer. Broadcast deals aren't casual endorsements. Networks compete. Rights deals are negotiated years in advance. NBC isn't just a logo, it's a competitor to other media partners. So when Clark aligns publicly with one giant, it shifts the ecosystem. And suddenly, this isn't about ego, it's about media, politics. It's about billion-dollar negotiations happening behind closed doors. It's about who controls the narrative of women's basketball moving forward. And that's where this situation escalates. Because if Clark's NBC role grows, and ratings follow her there, the league loses its monopoly on her platform, and once that happens, the real leverage changes hands, and that's when the temperature inside the league office reportedly spiked, because once leverage shifts, control slips. And control is everything in professional sports. Sources began whispering that emergency meetings were held, not casual check-ins, real strategy sessions, lawyers involved, media consultants brought in. The central question hanging in the air like smoke: what if Caitlin Clark doesn't blink? Because that's the part nobody was prepared for. If she quietly stepped back from NBC, the league could frame it as clarification. If she softened her stance, this could all disappear in a news cycle. But what if she doubles down? What if she shows up on NBC wearing Indiana Fever gear, smiling, promoting the WNBA, while technically working for another broadcast partner? That would expose the warning for what Stephen A. is calling it: insecurity disguised as policy. And that's when sponsors start watching closely. Nike doesn't like instability. State Farm doesn't like controversy attached to their golden asset. Networks don't like being publicly challenged. Every corporate partner tied to Clark is now calculating risk. And here's the cold reality the league can't ignore. Clark's endorsement portfolio is worth exponentially more than her WNBA contract. That means, if this escalates, she doesn't need to win the argument legally. She wins it financially, and once money tilts one direction, power follows. Now imagine this scenario. Opening night, NBC promo airs. Clark appears in a national spot discussing basketball's growth. Social media explodes. Ratings spike. And instead of hurting the WNBA, it boosts overall interest. If that happens, the warning letter becomes a historic miscalculation, because you can't punish the engine that's pulling the train. And that's where this story turns dangerous for leadership. Stephen A. didn't just criticize a decision. He publicly questioned whether the commissioner understands modern sports economics. And when that narrative spreads, when fans start echoing it, pressure mounts fast. Board members hear it, owners hear it, sponsors hear it. And the most dangerous thing in business isn't a mistake, it's the perception of incompetence now. The league is staring at a crossroads: back down quietly and absorb the embarrassment, or escalate and risk open rebellion from fans, sponsors, and possibly their biggest star. And if they choose wrong, this won't just be a controversy, it'll be a defining moment in WNBA history. Because here's the part nobody inside that league office wants to say out loud: this isn't really about NBC, it's about power. For the first time in WNBA history, a player's brand might be bigger than the structure trying to contain it. And that terrifies people who build careers on controlling narratives, negotiating broadcast deals, and deciding who gets spotlighted. Caitlin Clark didn't ask for that power. Gets spotlighted. Caitlin Clark didn't ask for that power. The ratings handed it to her. The sold-out arenas handed it to her. The billion-dollar media negotiations handed it to her. And now Stephen A. Smith has poured gasoline on the fire by framing this as something far bigger than a contract dispute. He's turned it into a referendum on leadership. When he says resign, that's not commentary, that's escalation. Because once national media starts questioning competence at the top, the story doesn't die quietly, it multiplies. Inside locker rooms, players are watching closely. Some veterans feel conflicted. On one hand, they want league rules applied evenly. On the other, they know Clark's presence has already lifted salaries, charter flights, sponsorship opportunities. Even players who resent the spotlight understand the math, and math doesn't lie. If this situation fractures the relationship between Clark and the league office, the ripple effect won't stop at one player. Future stars will remember. Paige Buchers will remember. Juju Watkins will remember. The next generational prospect will remember. They will ask one simple question before signing. Long-term commitments. Will this league protect my growth, or punish it? That question alone is dangerous. And then there's the fans. You can feel the tension online. Social feeds split into camps. Hashtags, trending, think pieces flying. Debate shows replaying the clip of Stephen A. removing his glasses like it's a courtroom. Drama. The optics are brutal. On one side, a young star expanding women's basketball visibility through a major network deal. On the other, a league appearing territorial. Even if the warning was procedural, even if it was technical compliance language, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that the league tried to clip its own wings. If leadership doubles down, this could spiral into something we've never seen in the WNBA era, a public power struggle between the commissioner's office and its most marketable player. If they retreat, they look shaken. Either way, the authority gap has been exposed, and Stephen A. Smith understands something critical. Once fans begin questioning leadership competence, pressure doesn't fade, it compounds. So now we're waiting to see if there's a retraction, waiting to see if Clark responds publicly, waiting to see if sponsors quietly apply pressure behind closed doors. Because if this becomes a test of wills, only one side truly has leverage. And the next move, it could decide who actually runs the future of women's basketball. And just when it felt like this story couldn't get any more explosive, a new layer of tension started brewing behind closed doors. Because here's the twist nobody saw coming. What if this wasn't a threat? What if it was a test? League insiders have quietly hinted that the so-called warning may have been more about internal optics than actual enforcement, a procedural move, a technical review, something designed to show other players that rules apply evenly, even when the spotlight is blinding. But in trying to prove control, they may have accidentally exposed insecurity. And that's the danger. Because now the narrative isn't about contract language, it's about whether the WNBA leadership truly understands the era it's operating in. We are no longer in the days where a league owns the entire identity of its athletes. This is the nil generation, the brand generation, the MEU-savvy generation. Players are platforms, players are networks, players are leverage. And Caitlin Clark represents that shift more than anyone. She doesn't just play in the league. She moves ratings outside of it. That's the difference. Stephen A. Smith didn't demand a resignation just to create noise. He recognized a power shift. When he called for leadership to step down, what he was really saying was this: adapt, or get replaced. But here's where it gets even more complicated, because inside that same league are veterans who built the foundation, players who fought for charter flights, who endured small arenas and limited coverage, who sacrificed so this new era could exist. And now they're watching a rookie, a generational rookie. Yes, command national deals, primetime features, and executive attention. That dynamic is volatile, not necessarily hateful, not necessarily malicious, but fragile. If the commissioner appears too soft on Clark, some veterans feel overlooked. If the commissioner appears too strict, fans revolt. It's a razor's edge, and Stephen A.'s public pressure just made it sharper. Meanwhile, Clark hasn't exploded. She hasn't ranted. She hasn't fired back. She's done something far more dangerous. She's stayed calm, because silence, when you hold leverage, is power. If she steps onto NBC broadcasts confidently, smiling, discussing the game, wearing her WNBA hoodie like armor, and the league does nothing, the warning fades into embarrassment. If the league escalates, they ignite a war they cannot afford. Sponsors are watching, networks are watching, future draft classes are watching, the NBA is watching. And here's the final twist that nobody in this situation can ignore. This might not be about resignation at all. It might be about evolution. If this conflict forces clearer policies, better revenue sharing, smarter media alignment, it could strengthen the league long-term. But if pride overrides strategy, if ego overrides economics, then Stephen A's demand won't sound extreme anymore. It will sound prophetic because history in sports doesn't remember who issued memos, it remembers who recognized change too late. Right now, the WNBA stands at a crossroads between control and collaboration, between protecting structure and embracing star power. The warning has been issued. The cameras are rolling. Stephen A has drawn his line, and the next move from the commissioner's office won't just respond to a broadcaster deal, it will reveal whether the league truly understands the magnitude of the moment it's standing in. And trust me, everyone is waiting. Now here's the part nobody in the league office wants to admit out loud. This was never just about an NBC deal. This was about control, about who really runs the future of women's basketball. Because the second Stephen A. Smith went on national television and demanded the commissioner resign, the power dynamic shifted in real time. This wasn't just sports debate anymore. This became a legitimacy crisis. You had one of the loudest voices in sports media essentially saying, the leadership is out of touch. That's not a small accusation, that's a credibility earthquake. And the reason it hit so hard, because fans already feel the tension. They've seen the awkward interviews, the passive-aggressive comments, the subtle shots, the visible divide between the old guard and the new era. Caitlin Clark didn't create that tension, she exposed it. When she signed that NBC deal, she didn't ask permission to be bigger than the system, she just became bigger than the system. And that's terrifying for traditional leadership structures. Once a player proves they don't need the league to thrive, the leverage flips. The league to thrive, the leverage flips. Clark can broadcast. Clark can endorse. Clark can headline events. Clark can elevate women's basketball without asking for clearance. And if the league tries to restrict that, it doesn't just look restrictive, it looks insecure. Stephen A. understood something critical when he made that resignation demand. He wasn't just defending Caitlin Clark. He was defending the business logic of modern sports. Stars drive revenue. Revenue drives growth. Growth requires alignment. You don't threaten your growth engine, you collaborate with it. And here's where the stakes explode even further. Because if this situation spirals, it won't just affect Clark, it affects Paige Bucher's entering the league. It affects future draft classes, it affects how agents negotiate, it affects how networks view partnership stability. If the perception becomes that the WNBA punishes visibility instead of rewarding it, the long-term damage could be severe. That's why this moment is bigger than headlines. It's structural, and now all eyes are on Cathy Engelbert. Does she double down? Does she clarify? Does she pivot and publicly embrace Clark's media expansion? Or does pride keep the tension simmering? Because if pride wins, the fans will choose sides, and history shows something very clearly. Fans almost always choose the star. Stephen A. lit the match. Clark stayed silent. The commissioner holds the next move, and whichever direction this goes will define not just this season, but the entire trajectory of the league's next decade. This isn't drama for clicks. This is a leadership stress test, and the clock, it's ticking louder by the minute. So now the question isn't, WHETHER, Stephen A. Smith went too far. The real question is this: what are you going to do about it? Because if fans stay silent, this becomes the blueprint. Star player grows too big, warn her, control her, try to shrink her back into the system. And if that works once, it works forever. But if the fans push back, if the viewers make it crystal clear that they are here for the talent, the growth, the evolution of the game, not political ego battles behind closed doors, then everything changes. This moment is bigger than Caitlin Clark. It's about whether the WNBA wants to operate like a modern billion-dollar sports entity, or a fragile organization afraid of its own success. Stephen A. made his stance clear. Now the league has to respond. And the fans, they are the ultimate leverage. So sound off loudly. Does this leadership or insecurity? Is this protection of the brand or sabotage of it? Because one thing is certain: the next move from the league office will either calm this storm or ignite something they cannot control.